So this is the regular council meeting of Monday, July 19, 2021, commencing at 6 o'clock. This meeting is being recorded by Zoom. So first item is adoption of the minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes: the Governance and Operations Committee meeting of June 28, 2021, the public hearing of June 28, 2021, and the regular council meeting of June 28, 2021. The recommendation before you is to adopt as circulated all 3 sets of meeting minutes. Do I have someone to make that motion?
So moved.
Councillor Dobie and Councillor Gattafoni Robinson, your hands I saw first. Any errors, omissions on the minutes? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against, if any? Carried, thank you. Item 3, so we're just gonna again do the reordering. 3.1, TELUS infrastructure installation request, Popple Park. Ms. McIsaac, I'm going to turn the floor over to you to do the lead in to this.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. The city is in receipt of communications from TELUS. They are seeking to install new telecommunications infrastructure within the city of Trail, and more specifically to be located in Popple Park, so that an improvement in local services can be achieved. In late 2020, consultants on behalf of TELUS, Mr. Brian Gregg, approached city staff with a request to install new infrastructure within the municipality to improve both voice and high-speed wireless services in our area. With an increase in individuals working from home and requests for improved services, TELUS is advancing plans to address the issues that have been noticed here. Within their request, TELUS engineers had determined a location that would best serve to reach the majority of TELUS's customers within the area. And while a number of potential sites were assessed within TELUS's primary search area, the original site selected was within the Popple Park area. At first, it was intended that the communication tower would be located in the southeast corner of the park, near the intersection of East Street and 5th Avenue. However, after city staff reviewed the area in the context of field use, as well as access that would be required crossing over the field space, both during construction as well as for future maintenance purposes, TELUS did come back and request the use of the northwest corner of Popple Park instead, which is shown in the mapping that was provided with the comprehensive reporting provided to council. There's also an existing power supply at that location. So in reviewing TELUS's request for the change, it was felt that this site chosen would be best served both in terms of access for TELUS as well as preserving the field and its use. When TELUS undertakes infrastructure installation such as this, there is a required public consultation process that is undertaken by TELUS or its consultants, separate and distinct from the municipality. Council had brought forward some concerns previously that the public consultation was being undertaken without council being fully informed of the plans that had been put in place. But it was felt very important for TELUS to undertake their public consultation process, which they have now done, and then to provide the reporting back to the city with a summary of all of the commentary that was received and positive and negative input that was provided, and TELUS's responses back to that. It is being proposed that a 52.3 meter monopole tower be installed within a 10 by 10 meter fence site at Popple Park, which would also include a backup generator and a small equipment shed. The site is located within undeveloped road right-of-way. So although it forms part of the green park space, it is in fact road right-of-way, which is commonly utilized for infrastructure installations. Once the siting of the pole was completed and based on the engineered needs of TELUS, The consultation process was undertaken. They provide notice out to residents within 3 times the height of the tower. So TELUS did send notice out to a total of 61 residents in the vicinity, and also did public advertising in the Trail Times in 2 editions. The commentary that's been received back is summarized by TELUS. It's important to note that the location of the tower is situated to provide enhanced services to the bulk of Trails users. So some of the commentary suggested alternate locations, whether it be distant from any residential or up on top of mountain. However, from TELUS's engineered review, it is important, in fact, that this equipment be located in proximity to our residential neighborhoods so that it does provide the best service. And we do have Mr. Gregg here to speak to more of the technical elements if there are any questions of council. So I won't purport to understand all of the considerations that TELUS put into play. However, it's also important to comment on the concerns that were advanced by some respondents around health impacts. And the installation will be installed in compliance with Health Canada's Safety Code 6 as legally required. And debating Health Canada's Safety Code is considered to be beyond the scope of the required consultation. When we look at allowing the use for TELUS to utilize the space of land, we did agree to enter into a license agreement with TELUS because it is undeveloped road right away. So if council does provide the approval to do so, we would enter into a license agreement. There would be an annual fee paid by TELUS to the city of $15,000 annually for the use of this space. And we, as a city, would have to provide notice of land use concurrence in the form of a letter that would indicate that the city is satisfied with TELUS's consultation process as outlined in the ISED's default public consultation process, that the proposed tower is a permitted use, that the proposed design and location is acceptable, and that the City of Trail has been consulted and concurs with the tower location. And the recommendation that staff's making is that council do allow this use of the lands. We have taken into account the public input, but do feel that the improvement in service that for the community's benefit as a whole is very important. And so the recommendation is that council allow TELUS's use of the land as proposed for the purpose of installing the telecommunications tower and associated equipment, that notice of land use concurrence be provided, and that a license agreement be entered into between the City of Trail and TELUS. And now I think it would be appropriate if council does have any technical questions that you require any clarification on. We can call on Mr. Gregg, who has graciously agreed to be present at our Zoom meeting tonight.
Okay, is there any questions of Mr. Gregg? So there's no questions. Okay, so the item before you, the recommendation is before you. Is anyone prepared to make this recommendation?
I just have a quick question.
Councillor Butler, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah. Mr. Gregg, I know a lot of times in the Lower Mainland, some of these kinds of towers are put on tops of buildings. Was that an option here, or any of the local stratas? Was that identified at any point or a possibility?
Yeah, so the honest truth is that to the best of my knowledge, there are no buildings within our search area that would have adequate height where we could do that. You're exactly right. Where it is possible for us to co-locate on really any existing structure that can handle it, whether it's a existing tower or a rooftop, we do that all the time where it's feasible. But unfortunately, in a lot of communities, if there aren't high rises, we just can't get the height that we need to get the signal out to the rest of the community or the intended service area. So unfortunately, in Trail, we didn't see any solutions like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kashoni, and you are on mute.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Gregg. Now, after TELUS has done this consultation, I went through all these pages, believe it or not, and reading of this stuff. Let's imagine the city turns you down. What then happens to this particular proposal?
Yeah, so the honest truth is I'd have to take it back to the team, and then we'd have to see whether there are any other solutions that could work for us. Obviously, we always have to find a willing property owner and a suitable location that, you know, the city is willing to allow us to move forward on a consultation on. And then TELUS would also need to, of course, redesign the site, reconsult the community, and so on and so forth. And so there's a cost for that. And so what ends up happening is there's often a window of opportunity where funding is committed to a site, usually in the early part of the year. And if we're not able to get our land use approvals, then things can sometimes get delayed into a subsequent year when we allocate funding to certain communities and certain projects. So, you know, I say that gently. It very well could be the case that we would continue to look, but I have seen, unfortunately, cases where, you know, we sort of take a run at it, go through the process, and if we don't get approval, unfortunately, it does sometimes result in delays to get the funding allocated to it again. And the reason is we're in, as you can imagine, hundreds of communities, and there's quite a few communities that are sort of requesting the service or wanting us to proceed. And so we tend to work on those areas where we're being asked to deliver the service.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Dobie, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Payson. I was just wondering, I can't remember in the report, and I too went through just about every comment with all the residents. Is there a startup and completion date of this if it's approved?
So the honest answer is that firm timelines and budgets get committed once we have all of our land use approvals in place. And the reason is because we don't know if it's a viable project until we get land use concurrence from the elected officials, so your council here tonight. Once we have that, we would then formally go to the finance committee, request funding to actually build the site. I do understand it's a priority, and the reason is this whole project is driven by longstanding customer complaints and requests for service from people in some of the surrounding subdivisions. So my understanding is, I mean, realistically, I think it'll be tough for this year, given where we're at, and we tend to build these facilities in, you know, we can't do it when there's snow on the ground, and it takes about 3 to 4 months just to fabricate the steel for a tower, even once we have it approved. So realistically, at this point, it's looking like the earliest would be 2022.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gattafoni Robinson, you had your hand up.
Yes, I did. Were there other locations considered besides this one?
Yeah, so originally, one of the locations we looked at is the mountaintop beside the subdivision, and pardon me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, Mural Heights.
Mhm.
There's the big, I guess, vacant, privately owned lot up there. And we thought that location would have also provided good sight lines and good coverage. But we weren't able to come to terms with the property owner. I mean, I don't want to speak on their behalf, but it looks like they may have other plans. Possibly it may go up for sale. And so, you know, we can't be entering into long-term agreements in a scenario like that. And then really our next choice from there was to look at Popple Park. And the reason that Popple Park was selected is because it's really centrally located within the area where we're trying to deliver not only voice service, but also data service, so wireless high-speed internet access. And we find that when we're siting our infrastructure specifically for data service, we actually want to be within the residential areas we're aiming to service, as Michelle pointed out. So this location, TELUS's team believes, you know, really is one of the best spots to deliver those intended services.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Sorry.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Mayor Payson. I guess I wanted to ask Brian if he could give us an idea of the what to expect when we have the tower in. We've got more, wireless ability. Can you tell us what the customers can expect? Like, will the internet be faster? Will it be more reliable? There's so many home-based businesses now in Trail, and I think a lot of people are going in that direction. The smaller businesses rather than have a storefront. So what can customers expect?
Yeah, so absolutely. Basically, there should be no more blocked or dropped calls within the service area. And I know that that's been a point of frustration for some people who have called in. And we actually keep track of that data automatically as well on our network. So it keeps track of the number of blocked and dropped calls. So a drop call, it's pretty obvious what it is. It's when you're on the phone and you get, you lose your connection. But what's even worse is when you have a blocked call, which is when you pick up your phone, you try to place a call and you're not even able to connect. And so there's actually been some of that going on. And then I think the COVID pandemic, obviously, people's frustrations were exacerbated, not only in Trail, but really probably across maybe the globe. It might have been maybe acceptable in years prior to if you had to walk down the street to get a signal. But if you're doing that every day for all your meetings, pretty soon it becomes not a minor inconvenience. So people will have reliable connectivity, not only for voice calls, so phone calls, but also for wireless high-speed internet access. And those are the kinds of speeds that you should be able to get that are sufficient to download things like high definition video, even things like Netflix. Not that you would need that for work, but that degree of large files, and certainly, any large files like for your emails or whatever you may do day to day in terms of sharing information with others. So it's the type of speeds that you would expect in any urban area.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dobie, you have another question?
Yes, I do. So if all this goes through and we have all this service available to us, say by the fall of 2022, what can we expect in terms of increases to our charges?
In terms of, sorry, for fees, like for
Yes,
plans?
so for our internet and Wi-Fi and all that kind of stuff, and our telephone too, what can we expect?
Very, very good question. To be totally honest with you, I'm not on the sales team, so I'm a bit reluctant to speak to that because I'd be lying if I told you that I know all the pricing. Generally, I just point people to the website because those plans are subject to change. But as I understand it, the pricing is very competitive. I don't think that there's an intent that when we roll a service out in a community like Trail that we're going to, raise the rates within that specific community. The rates tend to be consistent across the province, I believe. And then further to that, obviously the pricing has to be competitive. Otherwise, people won't take us up on those services. So, a facility like this is an upfront capital cost, somewhere between, we haven't done our detailed drawings yet, but between $500,000 and $1 million worth of equipment. So if we then don't load the network with customers because we charge too much, then it's self-defeating. So we're mindful of pricing competitively, and I think you'll find it's pretty much the same as it is currently. And then that said, if you find that the pricing isn't something that you're interested in, then of course nobody's obligated to use those services. So we are incentivized to find that sweet spot.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have more clear pricing. That's probably not the answer exactly you were hoping for.
Councillor Butler, you have a question?
Just thinking more long-term too, then that's a good point. What's the situation when it comes to removing this equipment down the road if it becomes obsolete or we're on to the next best thing?
Yeah, most definitely. Great question. I'm getting that more and more. Obviously, technology changes rapidly and nobody knows perhaps exactly what the future looks like.
But TELUS would be responsible for the removal of the pole.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
No.
And we're happy to still sort of further iron that out. But the typical sort of standard terms, I believe, already stated in the license agreement that we've proposed. And it's the one that we use it with all municipalities typically. There is some verbiage in there around restoring the premises and the site where we have our equipment. Basically, taking the tower down to below grade.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And of course, if it needs to be expanded, we understand it's park. Although it's a road dedication, it's for all intents and purposes used as a park space. And, we would want to leave it in as good or better condition than we found it as sort of a typical expectation. And that would be important to us too, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from council? Councillor Jones, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, Brian, just one more question, because we did have a few comments in here about the health aspect of this tower. Can you just touch on that quickly as well? There was 3 or 4 comments on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always sort of gently remind people that, of course, I'm not a medical researcher or expert, so I don't sort of try to pose as such, but effectively as an industry, and it's not just TELUS, it's any wireless carrier, and actually really any company that uses equipment that uses radio frequency technology. So that's not just cell sites, that's radio stations, everything down to devices as small as baby monitors. All of these devices fall under the purview of Health Canada's Safety Code 6. And basically, we're legally required, in order to be able to use the radio frequency spectrum that we operate on, we are legally required to comply with the Health Canada Safety Code. So that's taken extremely seriously. And on every site, we make sure that that's achieved. And typically, and we can demonstrate this, we're generally operating at hundreds, if not thousands of times below that limit. The only time, just in general, where a cell site would come even remotely close to bumping up against the limits is for workers on rooftops, typically, where we have antennas. And if someone were to, like a roofer or someone like that, were to walk directly in front of an antenna and be working there all day. So although towers are visible and look a bit utilitarian, it's actually the safest way to deploy the equipment. And the reason for that is there's no habitable space anywhere near where those antennas are operating. So some of the sites that get a little bit closer to the threshold are the antennas that we have on rooftops, and then people are living directly below. They're still well below, and we make sure in every case that we're way below the limit. But where I'm going with this is just to say, with antennas on a tower, which is exactly what we're proposing here, those antennas will be 40 or 50 meters above the ground level and then angled outward to service the community. Someone would have to climb that tower and stand directly in front of the antennas for an extended period of time for the safety code to be violated.
Okay, thank you.
It should be perfectly safe. Unfortunately, there's a lot of perceptions out there, and if you start Googling, really any topic, you'll find opinions on all sides of the spectrum. But at the end of the day, we have to follow the Health Canada regulation. They're the public health officials. They set the safety code, and really, we have no choice but to adhere to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yep.
None. Okay, there's a recommendation proposed. Do I have someone to make that recommendation?
I'll make the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Jones, and seconded by Councillor Butler. One more ask for any further questions. Councillor Kashoni.
I'm speaking in opposition. I'll go through it as quickly as possible. First of all, I would like them to wait and see. We may have Rogers come in, we may have another come in. We have no idea what's going to happen with that. We don't even know exactly how many customers TELUS covers in that particular area. At least I couldn't find it in there. And whether or not they stay with TELUS or not. We might end up with a tower sitting there, with TELUS tower sitting there, and because of the cost or because of whatever they're angry at them putting the tower in, nobody's using it. So you have to consider that. Secondly, let's imagine we want to put this particular tower in the Upper Sunningdale Park. I'm sure we'd have a number of people very opposed to it. Or how about if we put it up in, even better, put it up in Tadnac, right in the middle of Tadnac, the highest point there, and it actually is above Popel Park when you look at it. Tadnac location seems to be a very nice location to me. Or maybe negotiate with the person up there in Merrill Heights and put it up in Merrill Heights. So when you're looking at it, you know, for example, we have people here living in Glen Mary. What about that big park in Glen Mary that's rarely used? We could put the tower there. And maybe the coverage will be a little bit less, but we don't have any assurance of that. We have, you know, what Mr. Gregg tells us, but we don't even know how many people are there, how much it covers. All I can see is a lot of people in opposition to this particular proposal. I don't see a lot of people saying they want a tower, a 50 meter tower in the neighborhood, you know. And what about up there? Is it not possible to put it up in Warfield? You know, Warfield's got a large park up there, and anywhere in that area up there. So I'm not going to be supporting this particular motion. And I really think when you're thinking about the citizens of Trail, where they live and whether or not you want to be exposed to that particular tower, you have to think to yourself, well, do I want it next to my house, or do I want it 50 yards from my house, or whatever it happens to be? Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this? So, Mr. Gregg, I'm not sure if you're aware where Warfield is, but it's, you know, not close to, I don't think it would be close to your area where you've been having complaints about cell phone and cell coverage.
Yeah, I mean, so just to sort of gently respond to that in brief, I mean, I would just sort of kindly note that the sort of premise of this proposal is that where possible, we do try to put our infrastructure on municipal owned land. And, you know, the reason is to basically try to forge a bit of a partnership. You know, I think see ourselves as providing a bit of a public utility type service, even if it's not, you know, legally defined as such. And so if there is an opportunity, if it does make practical sense to have any lease revenue flow to municipal government, you know, that provides a broader benefit rather than putting it on, you know, directly adjacent private land, and then one individual, you know, would receive that benefit. And then, you know, first and foremost, finding a location that delivers on the intended service objectives, which, you know, Popple Park really does. You're correct that those other areas would be, you know, I shouldn't definitively say it, but at first glance, just looking at aerial photos, those are sort of totally beyond our search area. So I don't think that they would work. That said, I'm not trying to suggest for a minute that there's only one spot that could work. Often there are, you know, potentially multiple solutions. But we think Popple Park is very ideal for our intended service area. And, you know, we're hopeful that we can forge a good partnership with the municipality. As we've done in many other cases. You might have seen in some of my correspondence, I did share, for example, some of the sports light antenna installations that we've done at other municipal parks, like Queen Elizabeth Park in Vancouver at Nat Bailey Stadium. That's not too far from me here, and so on and so forth. So this wouldn't be sort of the first time in a similar setting where we've had this infrastructure.
Okay. I'm just going to speak to this because I haven't yet. I'm in support of this. I think it's really important for us to support our city and our businesses and those individuals working out of homes, and even those not working out of homes who are having interrupted and less than what they would like for any kind of IT service at this point. I think this is really proactive. I think it supports economic development, and I really feel that although there were some questions put forward about health effects, there does not seem to be anything that is supportive of negative health effects at this time, and I have full confidence that Health Canada would be on that. And finally, I would just say that no response doesn't necessarily equate to people not being in support or being in support. No response is no response, and that's just what it is. So we have a motion on the table, and we have someone to move and second that. And now it's time to go for a vote. And the vote is to allow TELUS to use the land as proposed, in short. So all in favor? Against, if any? And that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Appreciate you coming and answering the technical questions for us. And have a nice evening.
Thank you. And I hope that I made clear sense. I've been a bit sick today, so my apologies.
I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Thank you. Circling back to number 2, public question period. And Ms. McIsaac, I've been informed that you have received a question through our internet system for public question period.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I do have an email here that has been received from Lizette Tucker, who is a resident of 1816 4th Avenue and owns a business property at 1519 2nd Avenue. She writes, Mayor and Council, I'm writing to say thank you for responding to my question asked at the June 28th Council meeting regarding the costs associated with Councillor Robert Kashoni's Code of Conduct breach that resulted in CAO David Parahudoff's early departure and settlement. I now have some follow-up questions for Mayor and Council. Number 1, what, if any, additional costs has or have the city incurred since my first inquiry, and what is the current total cost? Number 2, is there pending cost coming for the City of Trail? So, sorry, excuse me. Before going any further, Mayor Payson, if you would like, I can answer the question around costs at this time.
Please.
So at the June 28th regular council meeting, I had indicated that it was expected that the city would face additional legal expenses of approximately $40,000 to $50,000 this year for the handling of the CAO complaint. I can now advise that as of the end of June and at the conclusion of the complaint handling, the city's additional legal fees are estimated at $67,500. With respect to the question, is there pending costs coming for the City of Trail? I would, as also noted in the June 28th regular council meeting, we will expect some incremental salary costs for the City of Trail for some of our administrative staff with the reallocation of responsibilities that the CAO is primarily responsible for. And with that, we will see some incremental salary adjustments estimated at about $5,300 monthly in the interim period until a new CAO is hired. Speaking then to the rest of Ms. Tucker's response here that has been provided, she indicates, I would like to also comment that I was extremely disappointed to see both motions to make this situation more transparent, the release of reports surrounding the conduct breach, voted down 4-3. This is not a good look for any council who values transparency. The trend as a democratic country is our citizens are moving to wanting more transparency, not less than from our governments. Democracy does get lost in the dark. The information needs to be brought forward to the citizens of Trail, not hidden. I am concerned to see a trend forming with some City of Trail councillors regarding voting for decisions for increased transparency. In the minutes of the meeting, February 22nd, 2021, there was opposition of transparency from councillors R. Kashoni and C. Doby. With reference to the minutes of the Governance and Operations Committee meeting held Monday, February 22nd, item 4.3, topic being council meeting minute standards. The committee considered the report dated February 17, 2021 from the corporate administrator, providing council with information related to the content of council meeting minutes and responsibilities for their preparation. From the agenda for the meeting in section 4, the analysis written by staff for council, it reads 4.1, transparency of meetings and public accessibility to the decision-making process of elected officials are central to the principles of accountable government. 4.2, as the appointed corporate officer, it is the writer's position that the practice of recording the vote in the meeting minutes, including the names of those voting in opposition, contributes to the above noted principles of transparency and public accountability. 4.3, for this reason, it's the writer's recommendation that no change to the current practice of recording the vote be made. The committee continued their review of the corporate administrator's report, dated February 17th, 2021, regarding the content of council meeting minutes. It was moved by Councillor Butler, seconded by Mayor Payson, that the report be received for information purposes. Councillors Kashoni and Doby opposed. The motion was carried. This brings me to my last question. Do the 4 councillors who voted against the release of more information truly believe that the voting public will simply ignore their attempt to stifle transparency? It leaves the public wondering what is being hidden from us. Speaking as a citizen of Trail, I'm proud of my community and city, but this type of behavior and representation on council does not make me feel comfortable about our progression and representation of the city of Trail in our regional communities. Thanking you in advance for taking my questions. I am looking forward to your response, and I welcome any contact from City of Trail councillors. So with respect to the third question being that, do the 4 councillors who voted against the release of more information believe that the voting public would simply ignore their attempt to stifle transparency? Is not a question that I as staff can answer. That would be to council to handle the answering of that question.
Okay, Councillor Kashoni.
Do you want some response now, or I was going to bring this up later on anyways, but did you want some response and some analysis right now? Is that acceptable?
If you wish, Lizette, Ms. Tucker.
Yeah, well, I was going to bring it up.
So
Yeah, I was going to bring it up, and I'll be answering the question. So if we go through, I was looking at the City of Trail CAO prepares for departure after 26 years of service. And when I'm reading there, what you have is nothing in terms of bringing out this information. However, when you have the section which talks about, for example, which talks about how you can bring this information forward, I'm going to the section there, which is strategies of dealing with the particular incidents and whatever happened, which is, of course, this what they consider to be this breach of council code of conduct. It tells its ends and tactics, and this is not a confidential document. I don't feel either. It's attached to City of Trail prepares for departure after 26 years. There's nothing on it. It says, tell people inquiring about the matter, including news media representative, the statement is the only information the City of Trail is offering on this matter. Now, it came to me as a complete surprise that Ms. McIsaac put forth all this information on costs and what happens at B and legal fees and all this. This just astounded me, because I was under the impression I didn't say anything, because I was working under the directions of what it says. It says, we can call this a regrettable situation that has now been resolved, and there'll be no further discussion other than the information that is being provided. That's another one. That's page 2 of the City of Trail CAO Departure Communication Strategy. That's the second thing. And I'm going through the third thing here. I know it's going to take a little bit of time. On page 4, it says, what has the third-party investigation along with legal and other services to resolve this matter cost the city and the taxpayers? And it says, this is part of the administrative cost for the city, and that is all we can say. So, and then the next one is Mr. Pereguilov getting a severance buyout package, and how much is it costing the city? And Mr. Pereguilov has agreed to continue to support the city as CAO until his departure in September. He will receive salary continuance to the end of his contract. So here going now, why has this matter been, somebody asked, well, I think she's asking, why has it been covered up? And this is the statement I'm reading from this document. This is a personnel matter and a situation that has now been concluded. The city has distributed a statement detailing what can be said about this situation, and we are now moving forward with a proactive search. And who made the decision that Mr. Pereguilov should leave at this time? Mr. Pereguilov had planned his retirement. The city was working on a succession plan. It was mutually agreed that this process be expedited to enable an earlier departure for Mr. Pereguilov, which council agreed with. So in no place in all this information, and I don't know these questions, how they're coming, but who in fact maybe is asking them other than her, but in all these questions that are asking, I was, and I think all the other counselors were really trying to cooperate with directions from staff and from the mayor in terms of what we should be able to say. So now here's on the other thing, on the release of the documents. On the release of the documents, we had to sign confidentiality agreements and watermarks, confidential with a name on it and everything. So, you know, and some of this particular information is really personal. I mean, I certainly don't want it out there in terms of other people. As far as I'm concerned, I could care less in terms of what they want to say about me, but I was concerned about what they say about other people in this particular documentation. So I don't understand how all this information last meeting came out and now this meeting came out. You know, it just doesn't seem to me to be what should be happening, but it's what's happened. And I guess I can actually put up with it. That's fine. In terms of releasing the information, I am not opposed to releasing 2 parts of the information, and I'll make a motion for it. I will release the information. I move to release the information on the findings of this investigation and of the recommendations. And if somebody were to second it.
I'll second it.
Okay, and I'll speak to that now, because now I'm speaking to the motion. Once again, in order to protect the city of Trail and the councillors in the city of Trail and Mr. Per Hudoff and everybody, I don't want all of the 26 pages of who did what to who and how, who called what name. And I mean, it's horrendous as far as I'm concerned there. But on the other hand, the recommendations are fine with me to be released. That's something that can be released to the public instantly. And maybe she'll be happy about that and read it. And also, I'm more than happy to release the findings, because the findings are the major part of the issue. And I hope that we have somebody from the Trail Times here. If not, I don't know, I'll be contacting the Trail Times and letting them know. And I think that most of the 4 people, you know, tell me if I'm wrong, are all 4 people involved with, is Eleanor, Colleen, and Carol okay with releasing the information that I specified, the 2 parts?
Yeah.
Councillor Kashani, that goes to a vote.
Okay, that's right. So I'll ask for the vote then. I've spoken enough. I'm going to vote on it. We vote on it, release the information, and then people can determine for themselves what the real problem is down at City Hall. Thank you.
Ms. McIsaac, before we go to a vote on the issue of releasing the recommendations and the findings from the report, did you want to speak to the logistics or the manner in which the media release as far as council comments versus a issue coming in at a public question period and addressing it in that manner?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Your Worship. So through a series of some very difficult special council meetings that were closed to the public, we listened very closely to commentary from our legal advisor, Young Anderson, around what information could be released publicly around the investigation and its conclusion. The speaking points that Councillor Kashani was just making reference to were prepared in advance of the public notification that was sent out around Mr. Per Hudoff's early departure. Those speaking points were intended for council to be utilized, knowing that you would be in an uncomfortable position and making sure that you were not in breach of Section 117 of the Community Charter in disclosing information that should be held in confidence. So to differentiate then from the public question period reporting, Council has a long-standing practice in place, and in fact, it's included in our council procedure bylaw that you do allow public questions to be addressed to council at the start of a meeting's agenda. This, through COVID, has been made difficult because we do not meet in person. And so we've provided opportunity for any public members to submit questions in advance via email to my email address. The questions that Ms. Tucker asked and I responded to at the last meeting, and again, provided an update today, are related to budgetary impacts of the situation. That is information that is routinely releasable. The city's financial statements are made public. You have a monthly reporting of checks issued that form part of the consent agenda on regular council meetings. It's public information that can be gleaned. There was not considered to be any reason not to disclose the financial implications of the agreement that was reached and the legal costs that we faced in getting to that point. So I just in terms of clarity around the staff undertaking to answer the questions, council wouldn't be in a position to know what those fine detail costs would be. And so I did respond on your behalf with respect to costing.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So we have a motion on the floor right now, and the motion is that the recommendations and findings from the Southern Butler Price Report be released. Is that adequate wording, Ms. McIsaac? Do you have what you need from, okay. Councillor Jones?
Oh, I can speak on this. I thought we were having the vote. Sorry, I got my hand up a little bit early, but I can speak on this for sure. Councillor Kashoni basically said everything that needed to be said in regards to the report. I just can't stress enough how throughout this whole process, we were talked to about confidentiality and to make sure that it stayed within council and, you know, what the outcome would be if we did break confidentiality. And, you know, even when I go to the Southern Butler Price Report, their last bullet is ensure that confidentiality is maintained with respect to the investigation consistent with expectations in an employment context. I mean, when I signed on that dotted line for confidentiality, I actually took it very seriously. I want to just also quote from the mayor's report for June the 3rd, 2021, the closed council meeting. It was also stressed there the importance of confidentiality to do with this investigation. We were told that our reports were water washed or whatever. So, you know, if it was copied or if it was given to anybody, they would be able to tell. We had to sign on the dotted line before we got our documents. And just to quote what the mayor said in her report, however, in discussion with Young and Anderson, I felt that, just a minute, I want to make sure I'm on the right bullet before I release information that, in order to ensure confidentiality, it was bullet number 15. Each report has a unique watermark and everyone, including myself, has signed a confidentiality agreement. So over and over, we were told how confidential this was. It was decided that the report would be released. I don't understand, and I still don't understand why the investigation part or the, you know, where the investigator is talking to the witnesses. We don't know who the witnesses were. We don't know if they were just council. We don't know if they, interviewed somebody from the regional district or from the community, or where they got their witnesses from. I wouldn't want to put this out there not knowing who witness A or witness C or B or D was, and put them in a position where they would, feel that they would actually be in a very vulnerable position. And I honestly don't think that I need to explain what that looks like when we're talking about confidentiality. So I'm glad that the motion has been made to put this report out there. I honestly hope that people do read it and understand exactly what we have been going through since January 25th of 2021. It has not been a comfortable position for any of us. But, I guess that's the business of doing business with City Council. And my hope is that we can work through this and move on and start working for the city of the people in our community, and start moving their issues forward like we're supposed to be doing. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dobie, go ahead. You're on mute.
This darn button. So I just have a little more to add to what Councillor Kashoni and Councillor Jones has reiterated too. Again, just can't emphasize enough about the level of confidentiality, but I think between transparency and council, that is definitely a very, very important aspect for us to work under all the time. And that hasn't always been evident for us. And of course, the second one is confidentiality. And as Councillor Butt or Councillor Kashoni and Councillor Jones both reported, what we had to go through from the time we were told we were going to be interviewed. The interviewer reminded us about confidentiality. We were told that by the mayor before we went into the interviews. As Councillor Jones indicated, we had to sign a release in order to get the copy of our report, which was watermarked so that the level of confidentiality could be protected in case any of us decide to copy of it. Excuse me. And then when Councillor Jones read to the mayor's report of June the 3rd, the rest of that report indicated that if we breached confidentiality on this report, we could be putting the city at risk of a lawsuit. So hearing all that, I think we took our responsibility of confidentiality extremely seriously. And that's the conclusion of my remarks. Thank you, Mayor Payson.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion on the table. Is there any other comments? Okay, I'll make a comment and just say that I'm very pleased that council has made this motion to go forward. It's unfortunate that it didn't happen sooner. And I'm glad that we're probably going to have some consensus on moving forward with some of the report and recommendations being brought forward. And I am also very, very heartened with Councillor Jones's comments on getting back to the work of the city. This is not what we are here for, to be dealing with all this ancillary nonsense associated with this complaint, which continues to go on. We as elected officials are elected to work for every single member of this municipality. We are not elected to work for councillors, individual sections of people. We are elected for the betterment of every single person in this municipality. And it's the global view of our work is what we should be looking at. So the motion on the table again is to release the recommendations and findings from the Southern Butler Price report. I believe did Councillor Jones make that and Councillor Kashoni, is that correct, or vice versa?
Vice versa.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to go for a vote. All in favor? Against, if any? Carried unanimously. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I just want to make sure that, and I'm just going to advise, I'm going to be contacting the Trail Times and asking them to interview the individual councillors who voted in opposition. So, and I'm going to be saying that I voted in opposition to that particular motion. When you look at the motion, is because it was going to release the entire report, and releasing the entire report would have been disastrous as far as I'm concerned. No problem at all in being open, and I'm as open as possible on everything as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, number 4, Ms. McIsaac, do we have anything else from public question period to come forward?
No, we do not.
Okay, thanks very much. We're on to bylaws. 4.1 zoning bylaw amendment bylaw 2906 2021 adoption. Did you want to speak to that, Michelle?
I will. Councillor Butler, this deals with the rezoning of the property at 2430 McBride Street owned by Menelaus Holdings.
I'll recuse myself as well from this final.
Councillor Butler is a branch manager of the financial institution where the applicant does business, so he will not be participating in discussion or the vote. Speaking then to the zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 2906. This is the rezoning of the property at 2430 McBride Street that is intended to be developed as a single-family residential dwelling with a secondary suite contained within. The rezoning would see the property designated as R1S in accordance with the city's secondary suite requirements. The bylaw was given first and second readings. It was submitted to public hearing on June 28th. It was read the third time on June 28th, and it is before you for adoption at tonight's meeting. It is being recommended that council proceed to adopt the zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 2906.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the recommendation is before you. Do I have someone to make that motion?
No, absolutely not.
Councillor Gattafoni Robinson, do I have someone to second that motion? I'll second that motion. Is there a discussion on this matter? Councillor Kashoni?
I'm going to be voting in opposition to this, and sorry, I voted in opposition to 2 things tonight, but that is only about 2 things in 2 things in about 6 years in terms of these kinds of recommendations. First of all, I want to say that I understand that Mr. Menelaus is going to be building a very nice place. There's no question about that at all. But what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the minutes of the public hearing held with respect to zoning bylaw, which are June 28th, 2021. And I look at Mr. Dino D'Orazio at 2421 McBride, and he expresses opposition. And then I look at Mr. Ken McCaskill at 2475 Collin Crescent, and he expresses opposition. And Mike Shanklin expressed opposition and indicated he shares the concerns expressed by Mr. D'Orazio. And then we have another one expressing concern with respect to secondary suites from Pam and Darcy Caron. And then we have a written submission from Doug Stone and Darcy O'Hearn expressing concern and potential for insufficient parking, increased traffic congestion, and having a negative effect on the neighborhood. And then we have a written submission from Paul and Navra Raju at 2465 Crescent. Correspondence received, concern about potential increased congestion, noise, less privacy, etc. And I never, unless I'm totally mistaken, I've not seen one neighbor or anybody within that area other than, Joel Menelaus expressing anything but opposition to this particular rezoning. I think that neighborhood is the way it's situated. We can look at each one individually, but when we have that kind of opposition, I don't really think it's wise to do that. We have this in Sunningdale already. We have people with secondary suites, and we have people renting in Sunningdale, and I'm fine with it. I don't have any problem. I have somebody just behind me renting and somebody a block away renting. I have no problem at all with that. Secondly, I think it was really expressed very clearly that this kind of rental on this property isn't going to be helping low-income renters. You would probably be looking at something in the neighborhood of $1,700 or $1,800 a month, or even more, in terms of the entire floor up in Merrill Heights. So I will be voting in opposition to this, and I encourage council to respect the wishes of just like the taxpayer, or, just like the taxpayer who wanted information on the cost for the cost there with the settlement. Respect the people who actually are living there and don't want to have this in their neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments? Councillor Jones, and you're on mute.
Thanks, Mayor Payson. Michelle, can you just refresh my memory, please, on how many letters went out to the neighbors and how many people that responded? I'm sorry, I have it in my stack of pile of papers here, but I honestly can't find it.
Yes, with respect to the statutory notices that were issued, we did deliver 16 statutory notices out to property owners and occupants within 50 meters. And we also advertised within 2 editions of the Trail Times. So there were 16 formal notices sent, as well as the advertising, and we received 6 responses back in the negative. Very infrequently do we receive commentary to the positive, except from the applicant.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to comment because we actually just got a report at the beginning of the year from the regional district talking about our desperate need for housing in this area. And it's not just, low income housing that we need. We need every level of housing, because we actually don't have the land available or the ability to build. That's why we're in the position that we're in. We discussed the issue of the parking in this area, and a lot of the parking and the traffic is a result of the Merrill Heights hike, if you call it, or pathway. There is a lot of people that go up and down that road to access this trail. And it's important to remember that, over once again, the period of COVID, people were actually out and about more. So it probably seemed like there was more traffic there. I think that this is a good opportunity to get some actually really needed housing in this area. And I'm really hoping that, people, the neighbors will understand that it's a need that we have in our community, and hopefully moving forward with this, it's a positive move for our community. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have any comments? There is a motion on the floor that I believe, a recommendation on the floor that has not been made yet. Has it been made? Sorry, it's starting to be a long day. Any other comments or questions on this? No. Okay, so we're going to go for a vote then. So the recommendation is for the bylaw to be adopted. All in favor? Against, if any? Carried. Thank you. I'm just going to text Councillor Butler to just indicate that he can come back. Just give him one more second to hook up. Okay, Councillor Butler's back. Item 4.2, Trail Recreation Fee Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2908, 2021 adoption. The recommendation before you is to adopt the bylaw number 2908, 2021.
So moved.
Councillor Kashoni, seconded by Councillor Gattafione Robinson. Any comments or questions on this?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor? Against, if any? Carried. Thank you. The next is 4.3, Zoning Bylaw Amendment Bylaw 2909, 2021. First and second readings, and Ms. McIsaac, I will turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Alan and Catherine Korth are applying to rezone their property at 917 Milligan Avenue, legally described as Lot 17 and 18 of Block 65, Plan NEP 1119, District Lot 230, from Hillside Single Family Residential R3 to Hillside Single Family Residential R3C, a spot zone, to allow for the development of a second dwelling unit on the property. The property located at 917 Milligan Avenue is presently zoned Hillside Single Family Residential R3, which allows for its use as a single family dwelling. The property owners are proposing to convert a 2-story garage on the property to a second dwelling unit. An off-street parking pad will be developed on the private property to accommodate 2 vehicles, which would be required based on the parking requirements in the city's zoning bylaw. In accordance with the owner's wishes, it's being proposed that the zoning bylaw be amended to designate the property as Hillside Single Residential Zone R3C, a spot zone that would allow for 2 single-family dwellings to be constructed upon the property. And just to point out a difference between the application here and the previous zoning bylaw amendment that we were dealing with a secondary suite, this dwelling unit, it will be separate and distinct from the principal dwelling that's on the property. So it's not considered a secondary suite. We therefore do need to implement the use of a spot zone if council is agreeable with the application. The R3 spot zone specific to the property would include all the other requirements of the R3 zone, but it would allow the existing accessory building to be converted into a dwelling unit. We have prepared the zoning bylaw in accordance with the wishes. It is being presented to council for first and second readings. It's important to note that the rejuvenation of existing housing stock in West Trail is encouraged in the city's official community plan. And while the focus is primarily on single family development, multifamily residential land use can be permitted subject to zoning if compatible with the single family nature of the neighborhood. There are some properties in West Trail where lots are of sufficient size and where parking would not be an issue to support 2 dwellings. This particular property is 465 square meters, so 5,000 square feet in size. Based on its topography, it could accommodate no more than 2 off-street parking spaces because the garage is being converted into living space. However, that is what is required by our off-street parking requirements. With the differing elevations between this and the neighboring properties, it would be really difficult to assess if this application will impact on neighboring properties. If any of you took opportunity to do a site visit, the property at 917 Milligan Avenue, the dwelling is located below the road elevation, while the garage is at road elevation. The property beside it is below road elevation. On the other side, it is at road elevation. So with that in mind, it would be difficult for staff to comment or assess whether or not the change of the garage into a dwelling unit would have any particular negative impacts on the neighboring properties. It's important to note, though, that Milligan Avenue itself is a very wide right-of-way, particularly for the West Trail area. So it does feel quite spacious when you are driving on to Milligan Avenue. Should council proceed with first and second readings of the zoning bylaw, a public hearing would be held to garner public input, and we would hold that public hearing just prior to the next regular council meeting on August 16th, and we would do the required public notifications out to properties in the vicinity, as well as advertising in the Trail Times. So the recommendation is that council consider if zoning bylaw amendment number 2909 should be given first and second readings. It's worded in that way because the densities in the West Trail area are such that typically we would want to see a reduction in dwelling densities, but in this particular case, it is thought that you may want to at least enter through the public hearing process to garner input from impacted neighboring properties.
Move as recommended.
Counselor Kashoni, is there someone, Counselor Jones? Any questions or comments on this matter? Counselor Dobie, go ahead.
Just so I'm very clear,
Mhm.
so that is that council will give first and second readings to
Yeah.
zoning bylaw amendment
Yes.
bylaw? Thank
Yes.
you.
And Counselor Dobie, you had comments?
I have some questions. Ms. McIsaac, I'm just a little bit confused by some of this. Right now, we have a house that has people on the main floor and a tenant underneath, correct?
Yes, that's what they indicate. They have a border. a
And
lift
is there-
within.
yeah, is there then there's off-street parking for those two residents?
Well, there's not a separation of suites to the city's knowledge, so that's considered a single family dwelling. People can have boarders live within their single family dwellings. And there are, as I understand it, there were 2 parking stalls within the garage. But there is also a parking pad that can be converted for off-street parking.
So if they're saying that they can provide off-street parking for 2 vehicles, does that mean that they're going to be giving up the parking in the garage and they're going to utilize all of that building for
No.
living?
Mm-mm.
That's correct. They
so
will
actually-
They
so
will be
actually-
converting the full of the garage into dwelling unit. So the parking would
What they're
be
really
on
making
an
is a house.
adjacent- Sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
So when this is all finished, what we really have is a house.
Well, you'll have 2 houses,
That's what I
one
mean.
smaller than the other, and
This
you will have a driveway upon which 2 vehicles would park.
Yeah, and so this garage is going to be converted into a complete home.
That's correct. That's the
Right.
intention.
Okay, now I've got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Just waiting for Counselor Gattafoni Robinson to come back. Okay, no other questions? All in favor? Against, if any? Carried. Thank you. Okay, we're on to council committee reports. Counselor Butler, you're first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just one thing to report. On July 15th, I attended along with several other councillors, the Community Safety Task Force meeting. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Counselor Butler? None? Okay, Counselor Dobie, go ahead.
Yes, I have a few things. I just got a last minute item and it came through on an email and I tried to quickly copy some of the information. So I hope I've got most of it. And this is from Communities in Bloom. Right now, we've had to supply 30 extra watering times to all of our plants in the downtown East Trail area. So that has put us $5,000 over budget as compared to this time last year. And with this hot weather continuing, I'm assuming we're going to have to continue with extra watering. The other thing that I'd like to point out, I don't know how many people are aware that there's a 3D mural being constructed is not probably the best word, but put onto a building on Groudage Avenue. And I have no idea. I have no other details. Who's paying for the mural? How this is all happening? I'm not sure. At least Mayor Payson, do you know anything further about this?
I haven't been informed.
Okay, alrighty. I also attended the July 15th as a viewer at the Safety Task Force meeting. Just a few pointers on the market. The next market is July 31st, but we have some really exciting news is that we now have a 3-day booking at the mall for December 10th, 11th, and 12th. Santa Claus will be there and this will be a Christmas market. So put those dates on your calendar. That concludes my report, Mayor Payson.
Thank you. Any questions for Counselor Dobie? Counselor Gattafoni Robinson, go ahead.
I think the mural that is being painted it's associated with Trail Association for Community Living.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? None? Okay, Counselor Kashoni, go ahead. You're on mute.
The issue that was raised at the last meeting on the 28th of June is with reference to the regional district is going to be covered off on the 29th of July at 1 o'clock, starting at 1 o'clock. We're not quite sure where it's going to be placed in the agenda. We know that it is on the agenda, and we're not sure yet because administration hasn't completely been advised of where it might be going. And I'm going to be making some comments on that too. Since most of it was in public, my position would be that most of it should be in public at the regional district, and that hopefully will satisfy people who are concerned about transparency, because I'm more than happy to have it in the public realm. The other item that is of interest is that the letter from Peachland, which I can actually report that now, the CART program, which is giving you money back for reducing your carbon footprint, is being eliminated. And I really hope that we support the District of Peachland on this. And just for example, at the regional district, it's going to cost $40,000 this year alone in order to make do with this CARP reduction, which is quite concerning. And you imagine how much money they're going to be saving over there. Plus, they're cutting back on the concept of us trying to move forward. The regional district of Cooney Boundary has done more for reducing carbon footprint. In fact, we're way ahead of the schedule. But this reduction now, we were using that money every year. In fact, we've banked a bunch of it for major projects. And now we're not going to be able to have it anymore because the CARP project is going to be eliminated. And that's going to cost the city too. And I'm sure that Reno will be taking a look and being able to let us know how much it's going to cost the city. It's costing the regional district $40,000. Hopefully it'll cost the city less, but nevertheless, it's there. The next major item is the budget 2022. So on the September meeting of the East End Services Committee, 2 or 3 people are going to be putting forth information on the budget for 2022, which is the 5-year plan, because we have some escalating costs that I'm doing analysis on right now. And that's my report. And I'll raise the issue of the Corporation of District of Peachland when it comes to the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you, any questions for Councillor Kashoni? So I have a question. If I'm referring to the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, June 28th, item number 224-21, moved by Councillor Kashoni, seconded by Councillor Dobie, that council not discuss the matter of the RDKB appointment again until a response is received from the RDKB, carried unanimously. I'm just wondering why you just discussed that matter when you had made a motion for it to be not discussed. And since it's been brought forward, is this now a moot point that we are able to be discussing this? I mean, I don't think it should, but I'm also don't think that update should have been brought forward either. It's, you know,
well, I guess here's my explanation. My explanation was that when we were looking at the procedure, we were looking at me to get back to you if and when and how it's going to be dealt with. And how it's going to be dealt with. All I told you that it's going to be dealt with at the meeting of the 29th. So that's basically the information, and that we haven't decided exactly how it's going to be dealt with. So it's not discussing it, it's just giving you basic information.
Yeah, I would think that that's maybe not something that should be brought forward, but we'll leave it at that. Councillor Gattafoni Robinson, your report, please.
Yes, I also attended the community task force meeting with other councillors, and also, I've been volunteering at the Cooling Center downtown in Downtown Trail, and I'd personally like to thank Marilyn Rackison and Marie Skinner for organizing it. From the month of June 24th to July the 12th or 12th, they've seen 365 clients and 120 volunteer hours. So it's being well utilized. And those are my reports, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Gattafoni Robinson. Thanks for bringing that forward. On Council's reading file, there is going to be and it might have even been on this week's reading file, you're going to see a published report on the number of visits per day for the cool or hot weather shelter. It is being very well used, and I thank you for your volunteerism. And just for a public service announcement, if anyone is interested in volunteering at the cool or the hot weather shelter, please get in touch with United Church. If you have an issue with that, get in touch with our city staff and they can probably get you in the right direction. I think they really do need volunteers, especially with the current heat that we're having. We're not necessarily in a heat wave, but I think they've determined that there's definitely a need there. So yeah, thank you for bringing that forward and thank you for your volunteerism. Any questions for Councillor Gattafoni Robinson? Councillor Dobie, go ahead.
I just had one. Since you've been to the center, I've been once, but it was a while ago when they first started. Do they still have people going out onto the street carrying out bottles of water and plates of fruit and bags of sandwiches to give to the people that are not able? Because it was my understanding in the beginning that some of the people that really want to come in are afraid to come in because they're having to leave their articles outside and they're worried about theft. So is there still somebody going out on the street from time to time?
Well, there is a one of the I think she's I think she's a nurse. She's been going out there with bottled water and stuff. So I think that's being done. I don't know how long it's being done or what. I'm not involved with that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Councillor Gattafoni Robinson? Seeing none, Councillor Santori is not here. Councillor Jones, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Payson. Just a really quick report tonight because it seems like we've all been at the same meetings, doing the same things. On July 13th, I attended the supportive housing meeting along with myself and Mayor Payson, and a lot happening there, but I know that Mayor Payson will be reporting on it, so I'll leave that with her. On July 14th, a really fun event with the Trail and District Public Library. They did a community treasure hunt. So each team went into the library and they got an iPad, and you had to put a location into the iPad and it would tell you where to go to find the next clue. So it took us all over the community, back and forth, up and down the streets, looking at different, murals and to the White Garden. And it was actually quite fun. And there were several teams involved throughout the month of July. Every Wednesday, teams are going out and doing this treasure hunt. And I can tell you that our treasure was the Royal Theatre. So it was a really neat, really fun event, really great way to get people involved and out, in their community, looking at different, buildings that we have and paintings. It was quite a bit of fun. I was going to mention the Cooling Center because I wanted to send a big thank you out to the volunteers who are doing this work. I myself haven't had time to get down there, but I'm hoping to within the next week or so. Apparently there is somebody out on the street giving water and food to the ones that are vulnerable and don't want to go into the buildings because of their belongings. Many seniors who don't have air conditioning are also coming to the center, but my understanding is also that they're reaching out to some of the seniors that are in their homes because it's too hot for them to come down. And on the 15th, I attended the community task force meeting along with several other counselors. And that's my report. Thank you.
Great. Any questions for Councillor Jones? None? Okay. So on to my report. So Governance and Operations Committee meeting as of today highlights. We had a delegation from the Lower Columbia Initiatives and they presented their 2021 second quarter report. We'd like to congratulate Yakomian and Rebecca for their new positions, being the Metaltech Alley lead and the LCIC lead, and thank Michelle, the treasurer of the board, for attending. We had a report from our communications and events coordinator giving us her report on everything that is happening with respect to communications in the city. With respect to public works, council approved the purchase of a 23 pole-mounted multi-snowflake seasonal decorations from Decralite in the amount of $29,785 plus all applicable taxes, fees, and charges. And the installation will be centered around 2nd Avenue. The plan is to have more seasonal decorations versus Christmas decorations. You can leave them up longer and progressively replace them as our older decorations fail and become stale. Haley Park Playground replacement. Council approved the removal of Haley Park Playground equipment, and the structure is not going to be replaced. The remaining 2021 capital budget is going to be used to complete the installation of new swing sets at Austin Lane Park and Popple Park, based on the understanding that the total 2021 capital budget will not be exceeded as a result of the diversion of funds to install equipment in the two parks identified. The mega capital plan amendment to support a active transportation network plan. This was for $50,000. What this means is that the Sunningdale Y pedestrian improvement capital project will be deferred until 2022. But when we get the active transportation network plan approved, it will allow us to apply for grants for several other projects, such as the Sunningdale Y. So considering we could not get any bids for the Sunningdale Y because of the status of the construction industry being very busy right now, it seemed like a reasonable plan to defer this project. Council granted the Trail Smoke Eaters Alumni Association upon issuance of incorporation documents license to make use of the trademark Trail Smoke Eaters name and proposed logo for the purposes of marketing and membership merchandising. Property tax collection summary was just received as reported, and thank you to everyone who has paid their property taxes to date. And we have awarded a contract to Davies Park and Associates, doing business as Leaders International Executive Search, in the amount of $45,000 for the purposes of recruiting the city's chief administrative officer and $35,000 for the purposes of recruiting the city's chief financial officer, plus all applicable taxes, fees, and charges. So those were the decisions made at our Governance and Operations Committee meeting today. My reports. So I attended the Columbia Housing Tour. So this was a viewing of the 9-unit affordable housing complex on Columbia Avenue. I would like to thank the Lower Columbia Affordable Housing Society and its board members for all their work on this project. On the tour with me were Tech, Columbia Basin Trust, and Kootenai Savings, who all attended the tour and contributed significantly to the project. Great community effort. The project is very nice. It's very similar to the one on Macquarie Street, just on a larger scale. Occupancy is going very well. And again, the Lower Columbia Affordable Housing Society is doing a great job managing occupancy and residency. Social Housing Committee had that meeting last week as well. We continued discussions on improving shelter space, the current shelter space, supportive housing, which is a long-term housing initiative, and also a shorter term, looking to the extreme weather that's coming and what are we going to be doing in the winter, and trying to identify different opportunities to house our vulnerable population in the winter, which will be rapidly coming. Community Safety Task Force meeting was held, which most of the councillors have acknowledged that they attended, and thank them very much for that. So we had the Mums Stop the Harm delegation. They expressed their views of supporting implementation of an overdose prevention site, and IH is analyzing the need and their budget, and we'll get back with more information. They also were interested in an anti-stigma communications campaign and have interest in leading that, but are looking for partnerships. So that is a work in progress for us, and having anti-stigma materials is, I believe, a very good opportunity for our community, and also having those materials shared. So we're having a consistent message reached out to all community members on ways to support and create tolerance and understanding for our vulnerable population. We also viewed a photo voice project, and this was funded through a grant that was received. The grant was written and endorsed by the city, written by Interior Health and endorsed by the city. And this is an anti-stigma video. And the city communication department will now work with IH for a launch plan. So please expect that to be coming forward in our community. It's a really heartfelt, wonderful video, and I hope it's impactful for all of those who are able to view that. I had dinner with the Columbia Basin Trust Board along with Director Worley and Mayor Morissette. This provided the opportunity to thank the Columbia Basin Trust Board for contributions to the city's projects. So that was a lovely opportunity for me to thank them, to meet some of the board members. And it was the first set of meetings that Columbia Basin Trust is having coming out of COVID. So they were very pleased to be meeting in person and getting back to business as usual. And then I also filmed a Destination BC video to promote tourism and trail. And this is part of their Explore BC Now campaign. And I just want to thank Andrea, our communications and events coordinator, and Sarah Benson Lord of the Historical Riverfront Center and our local historian for their help with this and the filming. It was very fun to do. So thank you very much, ladies. Are there any questions of me? Seeing none, move on to consent agenda. So there's 4 items on the consent agenda. As per process at last meeting, I believe we would move the recommendation, which is to receive for information. And then Councillor Kashoni wanted to pull out 6.2 District of Peachland. So can I have someone please move receipt for all 4 items on the consent agenda? Councillor Kashoni, and someone to second that.
Mhm.
Do I have someone
I will,
to second
Eleanor.
that? Thank you, Councillor Gattafoni Robinson. Appreciate that. All in favor?
Mhm.
Against
Aye.
if any? Carried. Okay, Councillor Kashoni, you wanted to pull out 6.2. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think it would be wise for us to, to contact the Honorable George Heyman there in terms of Minister of Environment and Climate Change Strategy of BC down in Victoria, and express concern about it too, because we have been moving over the last 5 to 7 years, we've been moving consistently towards lowering our carbon footprint, buying machines, even for example, the ice machine that we bought for the compressor that we bought for the ice in the Civic Center there. And we paid more for it. And of course, it in actual fact recovered the money over, I think it was 3 years. We covered about $18,000 a year. So we have used this. We've used it for a number of things with lighting, for example, even on the Cominco Arena there, the lights above the Cominco Arena, we went from around $2,800 a year. And when we put those lights in, we went down to about $185 a year. And you can imagine the impact on this when the big push is to have more and more energy saving and carbon reduction across the province, but yet they've canceled this particular policy. So I just like to see us write a letter of concern about this policy, because it may well be that they can reverse it.
So you're making the motion to pull that out and to write a letter. Do I have someone to second that? Councillor Joby, any comments on this?
No, it's the right thing to do, I think.
Any comments from anyone else in council?
No.
No. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against if any? Carried. Is there anything else in the consent agenda that you wish to have pulled out? No. Okay, we'll move forward then. New business? Any new business? Seeing none. Department reports. There's a bylaw enforcement department report of June 2021. The recommendation is that this report be received for information. Councillor Butler, thank you. Councillor Jones, second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Against if any? Carried. Okay, thank you. And adjournment at 7:33. Councillor Joby moving for adjournment. Thank you very much.
Could I just add one more thing? I should have mentioned this. For all of you that received the stout report from Mrs. Rackison, at the very beginning of the report, it starts off with the month of June. That's incorrect. The whole report is from July the 1st or July the 2nd right down to July 25th. She just wanted me to bring that to everybody's attention.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.